Alright, we are now in the final section of assignment number 2 for CPI 111. And in this section, we're going to get essentially jumping off the deep end, really getting into Game Maker. And in this section, we'll cover almost all of the remaining sort of basic Game Maker features and bits of functionality. I'm going to start off by showing you where we're headed, and then we'll get from where we last were to this final location. So here we are in our start screen. We set this up in the last section. Now when I click start, we're going to see a few new things in here. First of all, we've got a little health bar that appears above the head of our hero. And if the health bar reaches 0 by being hit by the demons, then the game ends, the player loses. However, we also have a little bit of information that says babies saved and keeps count of how many babies are saved by our dragon. And if 20 babies get saved, this is going to be the rule for the assignment, then the player wins the game. I've got it set up to be just 3 saved in order to win the game, and then when we win the game, we go to this screen and we get this not terribly attractive "you win" message, and then the player can start over again. Okay, so that's quite a bit actually. So let's get in and start building our way toward that now. And as we get started, here's a reminder of where we're beginning. This is where we ended our last session with our start screen. We hit start. If we fire on our guys, we get some points. If we save the babies, we get points. But if we get hit by a demon, then the game ends. Let's start with the saving babies information. So what we need to do is we're going to set up our game so that each time the dragon saves one of the baby dragons, we're going to see on screen that one more baby dragon has been saved. Then we're going to set up the game so that if some number of baby dragons are saved, then the player wins the game. All right. In order to make this happen, we are going to make use of variables. We're going to declare a variable, and then we're going to increment that variable each time a baby dragon is saved. This is something we've not used yet. In order to make that happen, I'm going to come back into our object manager. And when our object manager is created, I'm going to have it set up the variable and set the variable equal to 0, and the variable is going to be how many babies have been saved. So here's our create event. I'm going to come down to the control tab, to the variable section, and choose set variable. I can give a name to this variable to be whatever I want it to be. I'll call it babies saved. Now I'm going to need to remember this name because I'm going to refer to it in other scripts. So if you call yours something else or whatever you call it, make sure you know what it is that you named it. We're going to set its value to 0 and just say OK. So each time the main game room is loaded, which is basically each time the game restarts, this will get declared again and set to 0. Okay? All right. What else do we want to do with this baby saved variable? Well, we want to show it on the screen at all times. So let's go to our draw GUI event. We've currently used this draw GUI event in order to show the score, right? So we can do the same thing with our number of babies saved information. So I'm going to come down to the draw action, and I'm going to choose draw text. Oops, no, that's the setting. It's up here. Draw text. And the text that I'm going to draw is babies saved. And I'll put a little colon. Then I need to position it on screen, and this is going to be a wild guess, but I'm going to set it to 400 and set the Y to 20. Now 20 is the Y position that we use for our score as well. Okay. Now right now that's just going to show babies saved, but it's not actually going to show the information about the variable. So in order to do that, let's go to our control section, come down to the variable section, and then you'll see one of the options is to draw the variable. So I'll drag that out. Now watch very carefully. In the section for the draw variable action where we say where this action is going to apply, in this case we want to make sure that we know where that variable lives, essentially. In our case, we're safe with saying self because the variable was declared on the create event for the object manager, so self will work. Later on, when we're incrementing the number of babies that get saved, we're going to have to remember where that variable lives and point to it. So right now we can just type it in. Remember, it's called babies saved, and we will set its position, let's say, to 475 by 20, and we don't know whether that's going to be right or not, but we'll just leave it there for now. It's close and OK, and then play, and we'll see if we've got that much working so far. So now we hit this. Now you can see we've got babies saved over here, and it shows 0 babies saved. It's a little hard to see. We're not incrementing it yet, so we're going to need to get that set up, and obviously we're going to have to reposition our score a little bit so that it shows up appropriately. So let's go back into our object manager, or our manager object, to the draw variable, and let's change this to say 575. Alright, we'll worry about the position a little bit later. So we've got it drawing that information on the screen. Now we need to set things up so that as babies get saved, the number of babies saved information is updated. So how can we do that? We can do it by going into our baby object and checking the collision event colliding with the dragon. So what that means is that our babies made it to the dragon, right? We've already set things up to give the player some score, and then we destroy the baby dragon. Here's where we can also increment the baby's saved variable. So I'm going to go to the control section, come down to the variables, choose the set variable and drag it up over here. The variable that we're going to set is babies saved, making sure to match the case. I'm going to increment it by 1, relative. But right now, this is the place where I need to let GameMaker know where that baby's saved variable lives. Where was it set? And it was set on the object manager. And I say OK, and I say OK, and I save it. And that should be all we need to do in order to have that GUI showing the number of babies saved increment. So let's take a look here. See if I can save one before I get killed. There's a little baby. So now you can see when I save a baby, it shows up on the screen. We also want the game to work so that after we've saved a certain number of babies, the player wins. So let's do that next. We're going to go back to our manager object, and inside our manager object we're going to create another event. This is going to be a step event. And what we're going to do on that step event is we're going to check to see the value of our baby's saved variable. So I'm here on the control tab, coming down to the variable section and choosing test variable. I'm going to call it the babies saved, matching the name of our variable. Here I can refer to self because we're on the object manager, which is where that variable lives. And I'm going to set it to something low for now, 3. So if we reach 3, then we're going to win. Now we can choose here whether to have it be equal to 3, the check, or we can choose less than, greater than, and so on. What I'm going to do is say if we are greater than or equal to 3, then we win the game. It doesn't really make a big difference, but occasionally you'll design games where you're scoring points really rapidly, and there may not be enough time for the game to check how many you have before you've gone past a given number. By setting greater or equal to, then you're sure to catch the variable, even if it's gone above a specific number. All right, so what are we going to have happen? We've essentially set up an if statement here. What we want to have happen is for the player to know that they've won the game. There are a couple ways to do this. The way the assignment is set up, all you really need to do here is essentially to restart the game, and it will go back to the title screen. That doesn't really tell the user much. They're just playing along, and suddenly the game looks like it ends, and they go back to the title. So what we're going to do in this video, and I encourage you to do it as part of the assignment, although it's not a required part of the assignment, is to create another room, which is sort of the win message room. So let's do that. We're not quite done with this yet, but we'll leave it here. I'm going to come down to my rooms, and here's our title room. I'm going to just duplicate it, and I'll call it room_win, and say OK. And earlier in our videos, when we were moving from room to room, we used an action that was a go to next room action. And that worked okay, especially if we only had a couple of rooms, or if we knew the specific order. But that's not always the best way to move from room to room. If you name your rooms, you can use a different action that allows you to specify which room you want to move to when you have some event. That's what we're going to do now. So I'm not going to worry so much about the order of these rooms in the list anymore. Instead, I'm going to make a couple of changes. I'm going to come to my title room. And remember, this is set up with a start button and a quit button. I'm going to change the way this start button works. So I'll come back to my start button object, check my left button event, and then for the action, you can see here I've already changed it. What I've done is I've used a different room action, and I've specified which room I want to go to. And I've named my main game room, room_game, and say OK. So it no longer is using the go to next room. If you remember where we had that was here on the main 1 tab, and the action is right here called different room, and say OK. Similarly, what we're going to do is when the program recognizes that the player has saved at least, in our case, 3 dragons, then we're going to move to that win room. All right, so here's that step event on our object manager. Here's the variable check. If baby saved is 3 or more, then what are we going to have happen if it's 3 or more? We actually want 2 things to happen. When we are going to check some variable, and then we want to perform more than a single action dependent upon that check, we need to do something a little bit special. I'm going to go to the Control tab, to the Other section, and you see these little arrows. These are called Start and End block markers. They're used with checks like this if check to allow you to do multiple things related to a single if check. And what we're going to do is, first we're going to stop the sound, and the sound that we're going to stop is the background music. Then we're going to go ahead and move to the win room, which is this room here, and say OK. I can have a whole bunch of actions in here, but when I'm finally done with all the actions that I want to perform, then I put in an N block action. Okay? Right now, our end room, our win room rather, it looks exactly like our title screen. So I'm going to change it up a little bit. I'm just going to put in some text here that says, "You win." Okay, pretty simple. So how can I do that? I'm going to create a new object. It's not going to have a sprite associated with it, and I'll call this object _win text. I'm going to have an add event, and that event is going to be a draw event, and I'm going to draw a GUI. Come over to the actions palette, and I'm going to come down here and to the settings, and I'm going to set the color, and I'm going to choose a nice bright yellow again. Then there's another setting that we're going to play with in just a minute, which is to set the font. The font that we've been using is this sort of default font that's inside GameMaker, and it works well for the GUI that we've been showing on screen, but the text itself is a little small, so it would be helpful to have another font with a bigger text. So let's set that up here in just a minute. But before we do that, we can go ahead and draw some text. So I'm going to the drawing section. Here's draw text. Drag that down. And the text is going to say, "You win." And then for our position, we're going to set it to relative and set the X and Y to 0. That way, wherever we place this win text object in our room, it will be sort of positioned starting there, if that makes sense. I'll show you in just a second. Okay, let's go ahead now and create a new font for that "You win" message. So I'm going to go up on my toolbar, and you'll see here's a Create a Font button. Click on that one, give it a name. Font, I'll call it Big. I'll leave the default font type, which is Arial, and I'll leave these settings the same, but I'm going to change the size way up to 24. And I'll leave everything else as is, and say OK. Now if I go back to my win text object, here's my draw GUI event, here are my set color actions and draw text actions. I'm also then going to choose and set the font. So I drag set font to, select a font big, and I'll keep the alignment as left. And say OK. Now I'm going to come down to my win room, and I'm going to place that text, the win text object, out in the room. So I'll select that object win text, and I'll place it roughly here. And say OK. And save. And let's test what we've got so far. Here's my start. Now I've got my baby saved. Numbers, I'm getting some points. It would be nice if this guy gave me a few babies to save here. He's really not giving me many. There's a couple. And there's a third one. Now you'll see I get 3. It moves me to the win room. I see the "You win" text message. The music stops, as it should. And then I've got these same buttons that we had carried over from our title room. And if I click it, it brings me back in. One thing to notice is that when I come back in, my font's a little messed up, so we'll have to play around a little bit to make sure that we've got all of that showing up appropriately. We'll do that in the cleaning up section of this video, but we're not going to worry about it at this moment. Oh well, we might as well clean things up while we're here before I move on to the health bar, which will be the final section of this. First of all, when we restarted the game, we showed our score was holding on to its value from when we played the first time. So to fix that, I'm going to open up our Object Manager, go to the Create event, and you'll see that we already have set things up so that we reset the baby save to 0 each time we enter into the main part of the game. Similarly, we're going to need to set our score to 0 as well. So I've gone to the Score tab, to the Set Score, drag that down, and I'll set our score to 0. That will take care of that. Another thing we need to do is, let me show you just briefly again what's going on here. Here's our game. Okay, get some score here. Oops. See if I can not get hit, then we can see how this works. Alright, there's 3 babies we save. Comes into the "You win." But now you see the numbers are correct, but we have that really big font. So we need to take care of that. Let's come back to our Object Manager. And you'll see that on our Draw GUI, we do a set color, but we don't actually set the font. So essentially the game is getting confused because it doesn't know which font to use now that we have a couple of them. So let's go down to our Draw tab, and we'll go ahead and set the font right here. We'll make sure that for this information we're choosing font 0, which is that built-in font, and then we say OK. See if I can survive long enough to win, and we'll test it out. Okay, no, it's still showing that awfully big font, so that's not what we want. Well, basically what's happened is our little font 0 here, which is our original one, has got this crazy size, which we don't want, so I'm going to reduce it down to 14 for the size. Then you can check our font big, and it's showing 24, which is what we want. Save, and we'll come in and test that out. Okay, but now we're showing things the right size. Let's save. Oops, let's save some babies. If I could ever save them quick enough. There's a couple. And there's one there. Takes us here. We see the bigger font. Come back in, and we're back down to this font. Alright, so that's got those pieces set up. The final thing we're going to do for this assignment number 2 is we want to not have the game end as soon as the player gets hit by one of the demons. Instead, we're going to give our dragon health, and each time they are hit by a demon, the health is going to decrease, and it's only when the health reaches 0 that the player loses. Alright, so let me show you how we can do that. First, we're going to go back to our faithful manager object, to the create event, and we're going to add a new event, a new action here, which is going to be health. And we're going to choose set health. And we're going to set our health to 100 and say OK. Just like we set the baby save to 0, the score to 0, now we're going to set the health to be 100. Now we're going to go to our demon, and we're going to select the collision event with the dragon. Currently the game just restarts, which is sort of a drag. So we're going to instead come back to our score tab, go to the health section. Here you can see we've got test health, and we've got draw health, and we've got set health, right? So we're going to come back and drag the set health here, and we're going to set it to -1 relative, so that each time the demon collides with the dragon, we're going to lose 1 point of health. Alright, so that all works pretty well. Also, while we're here inside our... Well, let's see. Let's just leave that as is for now. So we're going to lose a point of health. It'd be nice if the player can see that health dropping as the player gets hit by demons. So let's go into our dragon object, and let's add an event. And let's see here. Do I need to do this in here? Yeah, let's go ahead and do this in here. We're going to do a draw event, and we'll do it as a draw GUI, and we'll come down to the draw section of our actions, and or rather I should say we'll go to the score section. Let's come to the health, and then we've got this test health, and we've got this draw health. So we're going to draw health. Now this gets a little tricky because we need to position and size our health bar. So with a little playing beforehand, I've got this already set up. Alright, I've got the X at 40, the Y at -35, the Y2 at 80, the Y2 at -30, and then we'll leave the rest of this the same. And we'll choose relative. So let me show you what that looks like. Oh, you know, our game. So this will show the health bar moving along, but we still have it set up so that as soon as the player gets hit, the game ends. So in order to watch our health bar dropping, we're going to have to change that a little bit. So how can we do that? Let's go back to our dragon, our demon object, checking the collision with the dragon, and we've got this dang reset game here. What we want to do is a check of the health. So let's go to our Score tab, come to the Health section, and you'll see we've got this test health. So we're going to drop that there. And then we're going to say if the health is equal to 0, then we're going to do some stuff. And we're actually going to do two things here as well. So we're going to go back to our Control section, grab the Start block and drag it above the Restart Game. And come back to the Main 1 tab, choose Stop Sound. We'll stop playing our background music and say OK. Then we'll restart the game. And that's all we'll do for that. So we have a close block. Save that. Click play. Come back in here. Now if we get hit by a dragon, we don't die. We don't end the game immediately. But you can see the health bar above the dragon's head drops down. So let's try to get killed before we save too many babies here. Alright, so I get killed. This time it brings me back to our title screen. Let's start again. Score 0, health is full, baby saved is 0. Alright, and if we win, then we move to the win screen. Gosh, that's a lot of stuff going on. So, everything I've just did covers all of the pieces that you need for assignment 2, plus a little bit extra, actually, because we've included that win room. You don't have to include that, but it certainly makes the game more interesting. Once you have reached this point for assignment number 2, you will be ready to submit. For submitting assignment 2, we're going to publish the game out as a Windows desktop executable file. So let me show you how to do that. I'm going to go to File, and I'm going to choose Create Application. When I do that, you'll get some different options. You'll have a Windows installer, you'll have a runtime executable, and you'll have a compressed applications zip file. To make life easier, let's use compressed applications zip file. Making sure to name this something that will help me know what it is. So in my case, mine would be Brian_Nelson_assignment2 and then .zip, and then I click Save. Publishes it all out. Alright. Make sure you know where in the heck it is you've saved that, and then go and test it out before you submit. Alright, I've saved mine now out onto the desktop, and it produces a zip file, and then inside that zip file is all the stuff I need to run the game. So, if I extract it, and you should do this as well to check to make sure that everything works. Extract it out, and then click to test to see whether your game actually works. So here's my game, and it works as expected. So for this assignment, I want you to publish it out as a desktop executable for Windows. Among the choices that you've got, set it up as a compressed applications zip folder. Submit that zip folder. In addition, I want you to please make sure to submit the game project folder, also zipped. Okay? You may have to remind yourself where it is it's saved. In my case, I've got it in my Documents folder, and I've called it some crazy name, so I'd want to rename that one with my own name. So let's call it Brian_Nelson_assign2, and then I'll call it Game Maker. So I can make it a different name from the published version. So then I come out here, come into my Documents folder to where I saved it, and here it is, right here. You'll remember this .gmx folder. Zip that up as well. Oops. Okay, and submit this too. All right, so you're going to submit the published game, zipped up in an applications file, and the game maker folder, the GMX folder, also zipped up, making sure to identify both of them. The point in submitting both of these is that if your game doesn't work for some reason, then myself or our grader will be able to get in and try to take a look and see what's going wrong with your assignment. That's it. That's a lot of stuff. Have fun with this. And when you're looking over the assignment information, I want you to also note that there are ways to earn bonus points on this assignment. They're pretty complicated, but everything is possible given the things that we've done almost. All right, so this is a little challenging. Take a look at that and see if you want to do some extra credit points.